Hi everyone, it's Ardith, and today I'm here with lots of ideas for using the rainbow slider die in ways you maybe didn't think of. I've got 6 projects using this die set with other Essentials by Ellen products, including some from the latest release. These projects will definitely get you looking at this die set in a different way. This video is packed full of projects and tips, so let's dive right in. This die set was released last year, and it comes with 3 dies that work together to make an interactive card. My first project is a card made the way Julie showed in the release video published at the time. The first die creates the window in the panel, along with a notch so that you can grab the part that pulls out. The center also cuts out some shapes that can be used to decorate your card, some clouds and a shooting star with a trail. The second die is the rainbow. It has 5 cut strips and it forms the rainbow. There are score lines at each end, and you can see that it fits into the window perfectly. The third die is the pull tab that moves the rainbow. It has a tiny arrow cut out of the top so that the recipient knows to pull on it. I started by coloring the rainbow strips with Catherine Pooler inks. The strips are narrow, so I used a piece of paper as a mask to protect the strips that weren't being colored, and I moved the mask since it wasn't quite the right length. I used sponge daubers to apply the color since they are so narrow, and I worked through Party Dress, Tiki Torch, Melon Ice, Fiesta Blue, and Flirty Fuchsia, a nice bright rainbow. One note here is that you can color the bottom edge if you wish, as it does show in the finished card. Next, I cut the word happy from the front panel using the die from the Block Words die set. I lined them up over and under the window, and I also cut it from the pull tab portion so that there will be a surprise under the rainbow. Having the 2 happies on the front means that even when the card is flat, the happy birthday sentiment will be visible. Since happy has 5 letters and our rainbow has 5 strips, I used the same ink colors to color the letters. They're a little tricky to ink blend since they're so small, so I found it easiest to just lay them face down on my ink pad, push them down into it with either the ink dauber or my fingers, and then leave them to dry. I made sure to wipe my fingers between each color change. Of course, you can use tools such as tweezers if you don't like to get your fingers inky. And notice that I didn't start the rainbow with the same color on each happy, but I did keep them in the same order. When they were dry, I inlaid the letters back into the 2 pieces I had cut them from. For the front panel, I'd put foam tape on the back, which you need so that the mechanism can move smoothly, and the letters just stuck to it through the holes. For the pull tab letters, I used Scotch tape on the back because I didn't want to add any bulk since this piece will move when the card is all together. To assemble the card, I put glue on the back of the bottom of the rainbow strip panel, then I centered it onto the pull tab portion and stuck it down. At this point, the top of the rainbow portion isn't attached to anything at all. The next step is to add adhesive to the front of the top portion, the part with the partial notch, and that attaches to the back of the front panel. Oh my goodness, all these tops and bottoms and fronts and backs. Good thing a picture is worth 1,000 words. I'm not sure they've updated that saying to take account of videos. Anyway, you want to be sure that the rainbow is centered in the window opening, so I played around a bit until I got it exactly right. But here's what it should look like. A bit of a Z, or a Z if you're in the US. And here's a quick look at how it will work. As you pull the pull tab, the rainbow arcs up and reveals what's underneath. Oops, a smudge. Well, I guess I know where my first sequin will be going. To finish the card, I just created a white card base, removed the release paper from the foam tape, and attached the rainbow panel to the card. Then I stamped the rest of the sentiment with a birthday word from Totally Random Sayings Volume 2, with Gina K Amalgam ink in jet black. This stamping could have been done way back when I die cut the happies out of it, or at any time through the process. And finally, I added a few sparkling clear confetti sequins from Pretty Pink Posh to cover that smudge and to add a bit of sparkle. Here's a view of that secret happy under the rainbow. I kept this card simple and quick since I have so much more to show you, but there are lots of ways to add details and extras if you want. So now you've seen how to put the card together with Julie's instructions, but what if you didn't realize that this was how it was supposed to work? I watched a video here on YouTube by Jan that used the 3 parts in a completely different way, but still ended up with an interactive card. She didn't have instructions for her version, so I made up my own. I started by using the clouds from the set to create masks before blending Catherine Pooler It's a Boy ink over top with a life-changing blender brush. I faded it out toward the bottom where the window had already been cut. And here's my rainbow strip, which I already colored with Copic markers, using the same masking method as previously. This time the rainbow is going to be stationary, so I used tape to glue it to the back of the window panel. I snipped off a portion of the notched end to make it easier for me to position it. This time I didn't center the rainbow in the window because I needed an opening at the bottom of it. I just took my time and made sure it was straight. The window is my roadway, and this scooter from the new Good Time set is going to travel down the road. I lined up the pull tab panel behind the window and put tiny slivers of foam tape on the area where it was exposed, underneath the scooter's wheels. I put the back wheel down first, and then I got the front wheel lined up as well. So now this time when you pull the tab, the rainbow stays flat, but the scooter moves along. It's fun, right? To add to the fun, I glued the little dog on the seat using Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. I had also colored the balloons and packages from the set, but I quickly realized that anything I attached had to be able to move, so it couldn't extend too far. You'll see later on that I did end up adding the balloons, which really adds to the festive feel of this. I performed some stamp surgery on the sentiment that says "Let the good times roll," to separate the roll from the rest. I put the roll on the pull-out portion so that it will be visible when the recipient moves the scooter along the road. I used my MISTI to stamp the two portions of the sentiment, and then I used a black Copic marker to color in the outline letters. To assemble the card, I added foam tape to the back, including a very narrow piece along the bottom for good support. Then I attached it to a white card base. This time I added some twine to the pull tab to make it even more obvious that there's an interactive component to the card. And I figured out how to add the balloons without them interfering with the mechanism. And now this happy puppy is ready to roll. So those were two interactive cards that both used all three of the dies. But what if you use the components on their own? Here are some ideas to get more out of this set. That window die is just begging to be used as a shaker. I carefully lined up a panel of white cardstock with the die so the notch wouldn't cut. You could cut it with the notch and then trim the panel down. Either way, that distance between the window and the end of the panel is defined by the gap on the die. So I trimmed the panel down to 3.5 by 4.25 inches so that it was symmetrical and consistent in proportion to an A2 card. And that was the hardest part of this card. After that, it's just a matter of creating the shaker. I attached a panel of acetate to the back of the window panel, and then I stamped my sentiment from the new Voices in My Head stamp set. This set is full of very funny, very real sentiments, and this one says, "You deserve a full sheet of gold stars today." I used my mini MISTI and stamped it in the bottom right corner with VersaFine Onyx ink. Then I glued the letters from the Yay die set onto the acetate using the Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. I offset them along the window to add a bit of movement by lining up the two Y's along the bottom of the window and then the A and the exclamation mark along the top. I had these tiny gold star sequins in my stash. They're not from Ellen Hutson, but Ellen does carry very similar ones in the store, and they've been linked below in the video description. You can put the shaker mix into the shaker and then put the card over top, but I found it easier to put the stars down on the oyster card base that I had created, approximately where I thought the opening would be. Then I removed the release paper from the foam tape and I placed it down over top. And I gave it a test, of course. This card is really clean and simple, but it's full of impact and fun. Next up is a card that uses the rainbow strip die on its own. I colored it with Copics using the same masking technique as previously, but this time I put two colors on each strip to try and get more of a gradient look. I used the chisel tip rather than the brush tip, and I find that makes it easier to just pull down and get a pretty straight line. I'm left-handed, so I found it easier to turn the panel so I was always putting my line down the left side of the strip, since having that edge helped me control how much overlap I was getting between the two colors. Next, I grabbed a piece of computer paper and coated it with adhesive. Then I placed the rainbow down the center and a piece of white cardstock on either side to form one big panel with the rainbow in the middle. I got out the Best Day Ever sentiment die from the Photo Frames die set, and I ran it through my Gemini Junior. I colored the letters with a black Copic, and then I inlaid them back into the panel. And then I cut that panel with a circle die to create a focal panel. I also cut a slightly larger black circle to act as a frame. I grabbed 3 of the clouds from the rainbow slider set and shaded them with a pale gray Copic marker before adding stardust stickles for some sparkle. This glitter glue has been one of my favorites ever since I started making cards ages ago, and I still turn to it quite a bit. It's inexpensive and easy to use, and the sparkle is so pretty. I love to put down a few dots of it and then smear it around with my fingers to spread the sparkle, so that's what I did here on the clouds. And then again on the rainbow itself. I dabbed a whole lot of stickles down all over that rainbow, and then I used a scrap piece of cardstock like a mask on each side to help me keep the sparkle where it belonged. One tip here, because I used Copics, the colors stayed where they were. If I'd used a water-reactive ink like I did on the first card, the stickles would likely have reactivated the ink and made it move around a bit. To finish the card, I popped up the circle with foam tape and glued the clouds on. Next, I have another way to use those strips from the rainbow panel. I started with the new-ish Everyday Doodles set, and I stamped a background with the solid flower and the matching outline stamp, using Catherine Pooler inks in Mint to Be for the solid and Aquatini for the outline. I used an acrylic block rather than my Misty here, just because I didn't need a lot of precision. Next, I cut the rainbow strip panel with ebony cardstock, and then I got out the Everyday Punny sentiment set that goes with the Everyday Doodles set, and I chose one of the sentiments that works well with the flower. Have a bloomin' good day. I positioned the stamp on one of the strips, and then I got out my embossing ink. Then I remembered to use my embossing bag to put some powder on the black cardstock. This makes such a difference when you're embossing on black cardstock with white powder. I used WOW embossing ink and opaque bright white embossing powder and sprinkled it over before heating it with my heat gun. One of the bonuses of using this die as a sentiment strip is that you have 4 other strips exactly the same width built right in, so it's very easy to stack 2 or 3 of them up to give your sentiment some dimension. Using liquid adhesive gives you time to kind of squish them together and get them lined up perfectly. To add a bit of shimmer to this card front, I used some Nuvo Dream Drops in Dragon Scales, which is a pretty mint green with a bit of iridescence. I put a drop in each flower center, and as they dried, the little peaks settled and rounded into pearls. And for my final project, I used the pull tab die to create a bookmark. I started by using one of the Star Trail dies to cut a pattern of stars all over the rectangle, and then I chose an appropriate Reach for the Stars sentiment from Little Lady, and I stamped and embossed it in one of the curves of the star pattern. I used silver pearl embossing powder, which is really pretty with a shimmer, but you could use white or clear embossing powder. Then I blended a night sky. I started with Catherine Pooler Fiesta Blue all over the bookmark, using a life-changing blender brush. Then I went back in with suede shoes around the edges, leaving the areas around the stars showing just the lighter blue. Finally, I used Queen for a Day just around the very edges. This is a very deep purple, and I think it adds a beautiful richness to a night sky. I took a clean paper towel and wiped off any ink that was sitting on top of the silver pearl embossing powder, and this is where I thought I would finish. But then I had an idea for adding sparkle. This time I used Nuvo Glimmer Paste. I taped my bookmark down to my surface with repositionable adhesive so that I could easily spread the paste to the very edges. I used one of the Nuvo Media spatulas to spread the glimmer paste. I found that it was great for spreading, but it was really a bit too big to get into the jar to get the paste out. I made do and used one corner, and it worked okay in the end. To lift the wet bookmark up, I bent the paper underneath so I could get my hand between the bookmark and the paper and lift it away to dry. Then I blended the same blue inks on another bookmark die cut, and I spread the shimmer paste on that, so that my bookmark would be two-sided and the little stars would have a white backing. I added some silver cord from my stash to the arrow hole. And of course this die could also be used as a gift tag, with lots of possibilities for design to personalize it for the occasion. So there you have it, 6 projects with this one die set. Now I'm not saying you would buy this die set specifically to be able to make a shaker card or a bookmark, but they are fun and easy ways to get more out of this set if you already have it. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up below and subscribe to this channel for more inspiration. Product links are below in the description and also on the Ellen Hutson blog. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.